For 2,000 years the galaxy moved through its quiet orbit with a comforting lie wrapped around every star. A lie so old that no one questioned it anymore. A lie that said war was dead, violence was forgotten, and fear was something that belonged only in dusty books and half-remembered stories told to entertain children before sleep. And in that long silence entire civilizations were born, grew, and prospered without ever knowing what true danger felt like. So much so that when young species laughed at the tales of ancient empires, blood-soaked conflicts, and legendary warriors that once shattered planets, the elders didn't correct them. They simply smiled and let the myths fade, because they too wanted to believe that history had finally ended, that peace had conquered the stars forever, until one silent night a strange trembling touched the heart of the galaxy like a whisper from a forgotten grave. And without warning every star flickered at the exact same moment. Every engine across the galaxy shut down, every sensor died, every communication line collapsed into static, and for the first time in 2,000 years the galaxy tasted real fear. The kind that crawls inside the bones and whispers ancient truths no one wants to hear. Entire planets froze in shock, ships drifted helplessly in dark space, cities filled with confused panic as lights flickered and engines stalled, and in the Galactic Council, where the galaxy's most powerful leaders sat high and proud on their thrones of peace, terror crept across every face, because they all felt something heavy in the silence, something old, something watching, something waking up after centuries of sleep. Then the darkness shifted. At the edge of known space, a shadow appeared, so enormous, so unnatural, so silent that even the space around it seemed afraid, bending and trembling as if refusing to touch the presence emerging from the void. The Council sent emergency scans, but the results came back broken, scrambled, unreadable, as though the shadow devoured information itself. Seconds later, every holoscreen in the galaxy lit up with an ancient symbol no species recognized anymore, except the oldest, the ones who remembered the things that history tried to bury, and before anyone could ask what it meant, a single message echoed across every communication channel, every frequency, every star system, carrying a cold voice so emotionless it felt like a knife pressed against the throat of the universe. The peace is over. In those 4 words, entire civilizations felt the weight of 2,000 forgotten years crash down on them. Worlds scrambled their fleets, soldiers ran to armories, governments screamed orders, citizens cried in fear, and the Galactic Council collapsed into chaos as they begged each other for answers that no one had. Because this enemy was not new. It was ancient, older than the Council itself, older than most species alive, an empire wiped from records, erased from memory, removed from maps because even speaking their name once brought storms of war across 1,000 systems. And now they had returned with one simple demand: unconditional surrender from every species in the galaxy, every species except one. Humans. Silence choked the council chamber when the invaders' message displayed the list of species to surrender, all except humans, and a cold confusion flooded the room as every representative stared at one another, whispering in broken voices, "Why not humans? Why exclude a dead race?" Because as far as the galaxy knew, humans were gone. Their star systems sealed. Their worlds silent. Their cities abandoned, locked behind mysterious Terran barriers that no technology, not even the Council's strongest weapons, could open. No one had seen a human in 2,000 years. Some said they died out. Some said they evolved into something unrecognizable. Some said they left the galaxy entirely. Some said they hid. And the bravest whispered the oldest rumor of all: humans never die, they wait. But even those whispers disappeared over the centuries, replaced by comfortable lies. So when the invaders demanded surrender from every species except humans, the Council panicked, shouting over one another in terror as they asked why the enemy ignored a race that no longer existed. But before anyone could answer, something stranger happened. Something that tore the entire galaxy apart with fear and shock. The invaders broadcast their threats, listing every world they would destroy, every empire they would break, every species they would enslave. Their message spread like fire through the stars. And then, through the static, through the darkness, through the silence left by dead engines and dead sensors, someone laughed. A human laugh. Calm, confident, almost amused. The laughter echoed across the intercepted transmission like a ghost returning from a forgotten age, and instantly the galaxy froze, staring at the sound as if they were witnessing the impossible. The council delegates stared at one another, faces pale, eyes wide, hands shaking. That voice wasn't artificial. It wasn't forged. It wasn't faked. It was human. A real human. The first in 2,000 years. And that wasn't even the frightening part. The frightening part was how the human laughed, with absolute confidence, with no fear at all, as if the invaders' threat was not a danger but a joke. The invaders themselves paused, uncertain, confused by the reaction, and their hesitation only grew worse when a second message followed the laugh. A simple sentence, spoken in a calm, steady human voice that sent ripples through the stars. Finally. We wondered when you'd return. The galaxy trembled. Humanity hadn't died. Humanity hadn't vanished. Humanity hadn't surrendered to time or fear. No, humans had been waiting, preparing, watching. The council chamber exploded with terror and frantic questions. Where are the humans? How powerful are they now? Why are they laughing? Are they coming back? But as the galaxy panicked, the invaders grew angry. They demanded a location for the voice. They ordered humans to reveal themselves. And the only answer they received was silence, followed by another soft human laugh, this one carrying an almost playful edge. You declared war on a sleeping giant. We just woke up. Suddenly, old Terran frequencies, dead for centuries, came alive all at once. Lost human satellites activated. Forbidden star systems lit up with blue energy. Ancient human gates unlocked, opening pathways no species had ever mapped. From the edge of the galaxy, a low hum traveled through space like a heartbeat returning after centuries of stillness. And then the first Terran signal appeared, pulsing with power the galaxy hadn't seen since the oldest myths. Humanity acknowledges your challenge. Entire civilizations collapsed to their knees in terror and awe. The invaders' confidence shattered. Their command centers panicked. Even the council, once arrogant in their peace, now understood the truth they had avoided for 2,000 years. Humans had not disappeared. Humans had not lost their power. Humans had not died. Humans had been sharpening their knives in the dark, building strength in silence, watching the galaxy grow soft while they prepared for the return of something far worse than war. And now that war had returned, humanity was rising again, not with fear, but with laughter. The galaxy had not even recovered from the shock of hearing a human voice after 2,000 silent years when the first ripple of something ancient moved through deep space. A pulse so powerful and so old that every advanced sensor, every ship, every satellite, from tiny scout drones to massive planetary defense grids, flickered with fear and then shut down again as if bowing to a forgotten master. And, while the galaxy's species trembled, the one emotion flowing strongest through all of them was confusion. Because no one understood why humans laughed, why they sounded so calm, so steady, so terrifyingly amused by an invasion that had already crushed 3 systems in a single day, and the council chamber felt like a tomb as delegates whispered in panic, asking each other if humans were alive, if humanity had been hiding, if the return of human signals meant salvation or doom. Because in the stories that survived the ancient eras, humans were not described as heroes. They were described as storms wrapped in flesh, shields made of iron, flames that refused to die even when entire worlds burned around them. And now those old stories were stirring, breathing, returning. As the council tried to stabilize their systems, a sudden surge of energy traveled through space like a roaring heartbeat, awakening forgotten human beacons placed in star systems that had been sealed for ages. And each beacon flashed the same haunting message across the stars: Terran Protocol, standby. That single phrase sent chills through every living being because no one knew what Terran Protocol meant. Not even the oldest species that once fought wars beside humanity before the Great Silence. And panic spread like wildfire as worlds realized they were witnessing the return of something that had never truly gone. Far away, in a dark corner of the galaxy untouched for centuries, a colossal Terran gate, one of the largest structures ever built by human hands, began to hum, its metallic rings rotating slowly, shedding dust older than most civilizations, and the light in its core brightened from a faint whisper to a blazing blue that punched through the darkness like a spear of hope or doom, no one knew which. The invaders caught this signal too, and instead of feeling fear, they roared with laughter, mocking humanity's attempts to awaken old machinery, confident that no race could match their power after their long return from exile. But their laughter died instantly when the Terran gate pulsed again, stronger this time, sending a shockwave across miles of silent space, and from the depths of that gate, a voice, not human, not machine, but something in between, spoke a single sentence in a tone so cold it froze the blood of every creature listening. Terran fleet, waking. The invaders panicked now, shouting orders, trying to locate the source, but the gate vanished from their scanners as if cloaking itself behind a wall of impossible technology, and for the first time since their return, the ancient enemy felt a tremor of uncertainty. Meanwhile, the council chamber erupted into chaos, delegates screaming about extinction, about the return of weapons no one had seen for millennia, about the possibility that humans had evolved beyond anything the galaxy could understand, and amidst the madness a single ambassador, one from a species that once feared humanity more than any enemy, whispered the truth no one wanted to hear. Humans never laugh unless they know something we don't. And that was when the next shock hit the galaxy. Across hundreds of star systems, abandoned human colonies lit up like sleeping giants opening their eyes, their long-dead cities awakening with soft blue light, their empty towers humming with energy, their silent planetary shields rising again like guardians stretching their limbs after a long slumber. An alien fleet stationed near those forgotten worlds fled in panic, convinced humanity had returned in force. But not a single living human was seen. Only voices. Only laughter. Only calm responses to invasion, as if humanity was speaking from the other side of a veil. Suddenly, the invaders targeted an ancient Terran outpost drifting near a red dwarf star, believing they could crush whatever remained of human defenses before they fully awakened, and they unleashed a storm of plasma torpedoes, antimatter rounds, and singularity missiles that should have shattered a planet apart. But the moment the barrage hit the Terran outpost, a transparent sphere of blue light rippled outward, absorbing the energy like rain hitting calm water, and then, nothing. Not a scratch. Not a dent. Not even a flicker. The invaders paused, confused, scanning the shield repeatedly, and then a voice, soft and human, echoed from the outpost's broken comms tower. "Is that all you have?" The invaders panicked. The council panicked. Entire galaxies panicked. But the human voice continued, its tone casual, almost bored, almost amused, like someone watching a child poke a sleeping tiger. "You attack an outpost we abandoned 2,000 years ago," the voice said. "Do you really think you're challenging us?" The invaders shouted threats back, claiming humans were weak, claiming humans were extinct, claiming humans could not hide forever. But then the outpost laughed again. A soft, gentle laugh that somehow carried more danger than any weapon in the galaxy. "We're not hiding," the voice said finally, its tone dropping into something deeper, colder, and far more terrifying. "We're preparing." That single sentence rippled through the galaxy like thunder. It meant humans were alive. It meant humans were ready. It meant humans had not disappeared. They had evolved in silence. The Council finally regained partial control of their systems, long enough to display a grainy image captured from the Terran Gate. A distorted silhouette of a colossal human warship, larger than any vessel the galaxy had ever known, its hull dark and shimmering with strange energy, its engines glowing with blue fire that looked almost alive, and when the Council magnified the image, they saw something carved into the ship's armor, TFS Resilience. Earth endures. The chamber fell silent. Worlds fell silent. Even the invaders froze, their confidence evaporating as they realized the impossible truth. Humans had awakened not with fear, but with patience. Not with anger, but with certainty. Not with desperation, but with power. And in that great silence, as the galaxy held its breath, the human voice returned one final time, speaking with a calmness that chilled the universe. "You ended the peace. So now, you will see what wakes in the dark." And with those words, the Terran Gate opened fully for the first time in 2,000 years, bathing the stars in blue fire, and humanity stepped forward. The moment humanity stepped forward, the entire galaxy felt the shift, not loud, not explosive, but quiet, controlled, like the slow tightening of a grip around the universe's throat. And as the blue fire from the Terran Gate spread across the void like a sunrise after centuries of darkness, worlds and species who had mocked old human stories now found themselves whispering prayers to those very myths, hoping the return of the Terrans meant salvation and not a storm that would swallow everything in its path. The invaders, once arrogant and loud, were suddenly silent, their commanders staring at the data streams shaking in their hands, unable to comprehend how the humans they believed extinct for 2 millennia had returned with technology older than their empire itself. And while their fleets struggled to regroup, the council chamber was swallowed by a suffocating dread as the delegates watched the Terran ship emerging through the gate, a massive silhouette that glided through the void with a grace no machine that size should possess, its hull shimmering with faint symbols that looked less like metal and more like living scars etched across time. And as it drifted deeper into the galaxy, its shadow passed over stars and made them flicker in fear. But what terrified the galaxy more than the ship itself was the voice that followed it. A human AI awakening with a tone that was too calm, too self-assured, too cold for any species to mistake it for mercy. "Invaders," the AI said, its voice echoing across every channel the enemy controlled, "you have made a tactical mistake." That sentence shattered whatever confidence the invaders had left, and their fleets scrambled in confusion, some firing prematurely, others retreating, others demanding answers from their commanders who were now arguing over whether to attack or flee. But the humans, instead of panicking, watched with the quiet patience of hunters observing prey that didn't realize it was already trapped in a cage, and the Terran AI spoke again, its tone almost disappointed. "You challenged a sleeping force," it said, "and believed your voice would echo unanswered." The galaxy trembled at those words because everyone understood the truth behind them. Humans had not disappeared out of weakness, they had vanished out of purpose, waiting, watching, preparing for the return of something far older than these invaders. Meanwhile, the council tried desperately to regain order, shouting over one another, demanding that someone explain the scale of human technology. But their voices seemed small, pathetic even, as the human ship came fully into view, a titan of dark alloy and glowing blue veins that pulsed like a heartbeat. And when the ship's front lights activated, illuminating the void, they revealed thousands of smaller Terran drones awakening from ancient sleep, rising from hidden vaults scattered across the galaxy like pieces of a puzzle mankind had planted millennia ago. The invaders panicked, ordering a full assault, firing volley after volley of antimatter warheads, black hole bombs, and starbreaker beams that could shatter moons. Yet every blast was swallowed by the Terran ship's shield like raindrops disappearing into an ocean, not even leaving a scratch. Entire worlds watched the broadcast with their hands over their eyes, expecting the ship to explode, expecting humanity to fall, but instead the Terran AI simply responded with a soft chuckle that sent cold dread through every species. "We've seen worse," it whispered. That laugh was the moment everything changed. Across the galaxy, old fears resurfaced. Stories of humanity fighting with their last breath. Stories of humans refusing to die even when their cities burned. Stories of Terran fleets that vanished into the void with a promise to return only if needed. Stories most believed were myths until now. The invaders, enraged and humiliated, launched their full armada toward the Terran gate. Thousands of ships surrounding the lone Terran vessel like wolves surrounding a giant, believing numbers would crush the humans just like they crushed countless races before. But before they could even fire, the Terran ship vanished. It didn't warp. It didn't jump. It simply disappeared from existence, then reappeared behind them, inside their formation, inside their blind spot, inside the heart of their command structure. The galaxy screamed as every invader ship turned in confusion, unable to track the Terran movement, and the Terran AI spoke again. This time with a cold edge that cut through the void like a blade. "You still think in straight lines. We do not." Then a pulse erupted from the Terran ship, not a weapon but a command. A signal so advanced that the invaders' ships shut down instantly, their engines, weapons, shields, and communications collapsing like fragile toys crushed under a giant's heel. The invader fleets drifted helplessly, powerless, blind, silent. But humanity did not fire. They did not destroy. They simply watched as the massive armada floated in fear, and that mercy, the worst kind of mercy, terrified the galaxy even more than a massacre would have. The council delegates sat frozen, unable to speak, their hearts pounding as they realized something horrible. Humanity wasn't fighting yet. They were assessing, evaluating, measuring the enemy like a teacher examines a child's crude drawing, calm, emotionless, unimpressed. And then, When the invaders attempted to reboot their systems, believing they could still strike back, the Terran AI whispered a sentence that chilled every species in the galaxy: "You are not ready to fight us." That was the moment the invaders broke. Their commanders shouted in terror, calling for retreat, for surrender, for anything to escape the presence of a force they finally understood was beyond them. But the Terran ship cut through their panic with a simple statement: retreat is not an option. The galaxy held its breath. The council shook. The invaders prayed. And then humanity finally gave the command that showed just how far they had evolved in their 2,000 years of silence: stand down, or we make you. The invaders froze. Every ship in their broken formation halted its attempt to flee. Every pilot trembled. Every commander choked on fear. Because they all understood, humanity was not responding to an invasion. Humanity was waking up to finish an old war. And as the Terran vessel drifted closer, its silhouette growing until it filled the screens of 1,000 worlds, the galaxy realized a terrifying truth that had slept for centuries. The galaxy had never seen a sight as terrifying as the one unfolding now. With the entire invader fleet frozen in helpless silence while the Terran vessel drifted toward them like a calm predator approaching prey that finally understood the nightmare standing before them. And as the ship moved, its hull rippled with soft blue light that wasn't just energy. It felt alive, like a heartbeat echoing through metal, carrying the memory of a species that once bled across 1,000 battlefields but refused to die even when the stars themselves burned, and the council watched. In horror, awe, and something dangerously close to reverence as the Terran ship positioned itself at the center of the immobilized enemy formation, its massive presence bringing a strange stillness to the battlefield. A silence so deep it felt like the galaxy had paused its own breath. The invaders tried everything. They screamed orders, they slammed their fists on consoles, they begged their systems to reboot, but nothing responded. Their ships locked in a prison made of invisible Terran code woven with technology they couldn't understand, and fear spread through their ranks like fire consuming dry leaves. Meanwhile, across thousands of worlds, civilians gathered around trembling screens, holding each other, praying, crying, whispering the same question: how powerful have humans become? The council couldn't answer. No species could. Because the Terran ship was not acting like a weapon. It was acting like a judge. A quiet, patient judge that had waited 2,000 years to return to the courtroom of the stars. The human AI spoke again, this time softer, almost sorrowful, its voice carrying an emotion the invaders weren't prepared for. "We warned the galaxy once," it said. "We begged you not to wake what sleeps in our shadow." Delegates exchanged horrified glances as they realized the meaning. Humanity had not only known the invaders would return, they had prepared for it long before the council even existed, long before most species learned to stand upright, long before history itself began to fade into myth. The invaders, desperate now, attempted a final command sequence, trying to fire one ship, any ship, but the AI responded with a whisper heavy with disappointment. "We expected more from you." Then the battlefield changed. The stars around the Terran ship flickered as if bowing, space itself bending under the weight of something massive arriving just beyond the visible horizon, and the council sensors, finally flickering back to partial life, detected something approaching through the void, something bigger than any ship ever recorded, something with a signature that matched nothing in known history except ancient human records so old they were written before the council's oldest species learned to speak. Another Terran ship. And then another. And then another. Gate after gate burst open across the galaxy, blue fire tearing through the dark as dozens of Terran vessels emerged, silent and colossal, forming a ring around the invader fleet with impossible precision. And the sudden sight was so overwhelming that many delegates could no longer hold themselves upright, collapsing into their chairs as they whispered in broken voices, "This is an army from legend." But the galaxy hadn't seen anything yet. The first ship, the one that had awakened, dimmed its blue glow, as if bowing to the newcomers, and the invader commander, trembling in fear, activated his emergency broadcast to every world under his rule, screaming that humans had returned with the force of ancient gods, begging his people to flee, to hide, to run from the storm that had awakened. But the Terran AI silenced him instantly, its voice cutting through every frequency with cold finality. "Running will not save you." Panic erupted in the invader fleet, but before they could attempt anything else, the human ship finally spoke with clarity that shook the stars. 2,000 years ago, we left the galaxy not out of fear, but out of purpose. Delegates leaned in, trembling. Civilians cried. Invaders froze. We knew the peace would end, the AI continued. We knew you would return. A long silence followed, the kind that made hearts pound and planets tremble. And we prepared for this day. The invaders collapsed into despair. The council bowed their heads. The galaxy understood the truth. Humans had not vanished. Humans had not fallen. Humans had simply stepped away from the board to reshape the game. The Terran fleet adjusted its formation, ships aligning in a pattern so precise it looked like a constellation made of metal and fire. And from the flagship came a new voice. Not AI, but human, alive, real, breathing. Someone who had lived through the silence and now spoke for a species that had returned not as victims, not as wanderers, but as guardians and judges. Invaders, the human said, his voice calm, deep, and filled with the weight of centuries. You ended the peace. You challenged the galaxy. He paused, letting the void itself listen. But you forgot something important. The council leaned forward, unable to breathe. Civilians across hundreds of worlds pressed closer to their screens. Invaders shook in terror. The human spoke again, the faintest hint of a smile in his voice. Peace was not kept by the council. A pulse of blue light rippled across the Terran fleet. Peace was kept by the fear that humans might return. Gasps echoed across the galaxy. The human let that truth settle for a moment before delivering the final blow. And now we are awake. The invader fleet shuddered, their ships trembling as though sensing the end approaching like a cold wind. The human continued in a voice soft and emotional, carrying the sorrow of a species that fought, bled, and survived when the stars themselves turned against them. We do not seek war. The invaders dared to hope for a moment, until the human's tone shifted, becoming iron wrapped in fire. But if war seeks us, the Terran fleet's lights ignited in unison. We answer. And in that moment, before the first weapon fired, before any fleet moved, before any world breathed again, the galaxy understood the ancient truth carved into forgotten Terran stone. The moment the Terran fleet ignited its blue light in perfect unison, the entire galaxy felt as if it had stepped into the final breath before a storm that no one could stop, and for a few trembling seconds the void remained still, holding its own heartbeat as though the stars themselves were waiting to see what humanity would do next. Because for the first time in 2,000 years the universe remembered what it meant for humans to stand together. Silent, calm, and terrifyingly certain. The invaders, once proud conquerors who boasted that no force in existence could rival their strength, now stared at the formation surrounding them with expressions twisted by fear so deep it broke even their hardened spirits. Their hands shaking as they watched human ships glide around them like shadows given form. And what horrified them the most wasn't the weapons, wasn't the shields, wasn't the impossible technology. It was the silence, the chilling, controlled silence of a species that did not need to roar to prove its power. Meanwhile, across the council chamber, delegates clung to their seats with trembling fingers, their voices reduced to fragile whispers as they watched the Terran fleet move with the precision of a single living organism. A unity the galaxy had never achieved, and the council speaker, usually a symbol of strength, felt tears fill their eyes because the sight before them was both beautiful and terrifying. A reminder that peace had survived not because the galaxy was noble but because humanity had stepped away, taking with them the fire that once shaped the stars. And then the human commander's voice returned, echoing softly across every system, every fleet, every world, carrying a weight of sorrow and purpose that struck at the hearts of those listening. We gave the galaxy peace, the commander said, his tone calm but filled with a quiet pain, not because you earned it, but because our time had not yet come. The invaders, desperate to regain control of the moment, tried to activate their ships again, screaming at their pilots to fire, to run, to do something, anything. But every attempt collapsed, every system died at the edge of Terran power, and the commander watched them with eyes that felt ancient, knowing exactly what they were feeling, because humanity had once been in the same place, cornered, hunted, broken. But they had learned to rise from ashes that covered the bones of their own worlds. You struck first, the commander said. You ended the peace. You threatened the young, the weak, the innocent. The Terran fleet adjusted its formation, tightening around the enemy like a noose woven from light and steel. But you did something worse, he continued, the emotion in his voice sharpening into something thin and dangerous. You believed humanity was gone. A shiver ran through every corner of the galaxy. And then, with a voice soft enough to sound almost gentle, the commander added, we never left. The invaders collapsed into despair, some screaming, some praying, some begging their leaders to surrender. But surrender was not a choice anymore, not because humans wanted blood, but because the invaders had pushed the galaxy into a war they could not escape. But before the Council or the invaders could speak again, something unexpected happened, something that made even the Terran fleet pause. One invader ship, tiny and insignificant compared to the giants around it, managed to break free of its formation just enough to send a small transmission, and from that ship came a trembling voice, shaking with fear and desperation. Human commander, the voice whispered, we were forced to join this war. The galaxy fell silent. Even the Terran ships dimmed their lights slightly, listening. Our empire, it is dying, the invader continued. We attacked because we had no choice. They would have erased us if we disobeyed. The council gasped. The invaders themselves stared in shock at their own comrade. The Terran commander remained silent for a moment, his ship drifting slowly as he absorbed the words. When he finally spoke, his voice was no longer cold. It was something deeper, something the galaxy had not heard from humans in 2,000 years. Compassion. Fear makes slaves of us all, he whispered. But you chose to speak. That alone means you still have something worth saving. The invader broke into a sob. The Terran commander continued, his voice steady but heavy with memory. When the old war devoured our worlds, we too made choices out of fear. We became something the galaxy could not understand. Something the galaxy feared. But we never forgot what it meant to protect those who could not protect themselves. The blue glow across the Terran fleet softened, becoming less like a blade and more like a shield. We did not come to destroy a people forced into war, the commander said. We came for the ones who forced you. A ripple of shock traveled across the battlefield. The council stared in disbelief. Even the invaders seemed stunned that humans, creatures of myth, warriors of impossible strength, would spare them out of understanding, out of compassion, out of a shared pain across time. The Terran ship closest to the invader fleet slowly lowered its weapons, the metal of its hull relaxing like a creature letting out a long-held breath. And then the commander delivered the line that would be quoted in every history book for the next 10,000 years. We do not kill the desperate. We end the tyrants who made them desperate. The invader fleets trembled as the truth settled in. Humanity was not here to punish the broken. Humanity was here to punish the ones who broke them. The council began to cry, not out of fear this time, but out of something far deeper, relief. The galaxy whispered with hope, a hope no one had felt in generations. The invader ship that had spoken transmitted one final message, voice shaking with gratitude. Human commander, will you protect us? And for the first time in 2,000 years, humanity answered a plea not with steel, but with their heart. Yes, the commander said. That is what we were born to do. And as the Terran fleet moved, surrounding not the weak but the true architects of the invasion, the galaxy finally understood that humans did not laugh at war because they were cruel. They laughed because they were finally awake as the Terran fleet tightened its formation around the true architects of the invasion. The galaxy held its breath, watching a scene that felt less like a battle and more like Judgment Day unfolding in slow, terrifying clarity. And while the invader ships that had confessed their fear trembled in uncertain hope, the core enemy forces, the rulers who had chosen war, who had enslaved entire species, who had forced their own soldiers into a conflict they could never win, began to panic as they realized humanity was not coming for them with rage, but with something far colder, purpose. Their desperation grew as their systems flickered under the silent pressure of Terran code flowing through the battlefield like an invisible tide, overwhelming every device, every protocol, every command. And in the council chamber the delegates watched with trembling awe as the human commander appeared on every display, his face illuminated by the soft blue glow of the Terran flagship, his expression calm yet carved with centuries of sorrow and strength. You turned the galaxy into a cage, he said softly, his voice steady, almost gentle. Yet beneath that gentleness was a power that made the strongest species flinch. You fed on the fear of others. You hid behind force. You used your own children as weapons. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in a grief so deep it hurt to look at. We know that pain. We know that history. And we will not allow you to repeat it. A trembling hush spread across the council, across the enemy fleet, across thousands of worlds watching the broadcast. The invader rulers tried desperately to activate hidden weapons, override locks, send kill signals, anything. But everything they touched turned to silence, their commands swallowed by Terran interceptors that moved like ghosts through their systems, shutting down every path to escape. Meanwhile, the smaller invader ships, the ones who had admitted their fear, began to pull away from the core fleet, their lights dim but steady, as if choosing a different future, and the human commander acknowledged them with a slow nod, a gesture small but powerful enough to make entire species cry. You who chose truth, he whispered, you will not be harmed. You have seen the cost of fear. Now see the strength of courage. And then, for the first time, he turned his gaze toward the council itself, knowing that billions were watching behind those walls. For 2,000 years, he said, voice thick with emotion, you believed the peace existed because the galaxy matured. Because you grew wiser, better, kinder. He let that lie settle in the silence before tearing it apart. The peace existed because we carried the burden. Because we hid the dangers. Because we guarded the dark. A gasp rippled through the chamber. Delegates looked at one another with shame and disbelief, realizing their peace was not earned. It was borrowed from humanity's sacrifice. We stepped away, the commander continued, not to abandon you, but to shield you from what still hunted us. And we hoped, truly hoped, that the galaxy would never face the darkness again. The emotional weight in his voice deepened, trembling like a fraying string. But you brought the darkness back. And we cannot turn away now. Suddenly, the Terran flagship dimmed its lights, and in their place a soft golden glow rose from its hull, gentle, warm, almost human, and the commander's voice softened even more. Before we act, he said, we must know something. The galaxy leaned in. Why did you invade? He asked the enemy rulers. Why did you break the peace? For a moment, there was only silence. And then a trembling, broken voice came from the enemy flagship, a ruler cornered by fate. Because we are dying, the enemy leader whispered, barely audible. Our worlds, our suns, collapsing. We had no future. The admission sent a shock across the galaxy. This was not an empire of pride, but an empire of desperation, running from extinction. We needed resources, the ruler continued, voice shaking. We needed homes. We needed hope. The human closed his eyes. When he opened them, the galaxy saw something no one expected. Compassion mixed with sorrow, not hatred. You could have asked, the commander whispered. The enemy leader sobbed. We thought you were gone, he said. We thought the galaxy was weak. The human's voice turned colder, sharper, yet unbearably sad. Weakness does not justify cruelty. The enemy ruler lowered his head. We were afraid. The human whispered, fear is not an excuse to break the universe. For a moment, no one breathed. And then the Terran commander spoke 3 words that would alter the fate of the galaxy forever. We choose mercy. The invader rulers gasped. The council gasped. Worlds gasped. But mercy does not mean blindness. The human continued, voice steady again. The Terran fleet shifted, forming a wide barrier around the invader core, not attacking, not crushing, but isolating them with the precision of a surgeon separating a tumor from living tissue. You will disarm. You will answer for the worlds you destroyed. You will rebuild the ones you harmed. And you will never again seek war to escape your own extinction. The enemy leader fell silent, humbled, broken. The human commander breathed deeply, his next words filled with centuries of weight. And we, he whispered softly, will help your dying worlds heal. The council cried. The enemy wept. The galaxy shook, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that humanity, after 2,000 silent years, returned not as conquerors, not as tyrants, not as ghosts, but as guardians who still believed the galaxy deserved a second chance. The human commander lifted his gaze to the stars, voice turning calm and steady again. "Let the galaxy witness," he said, "that humanity does not rise for destruction." His eyes softened. "We rise to protect." And as the Terran fleet lowered its weapons and extended shimmering fields of aid, the galaxy understood the truth behind humanity's terrifying calm, behind their laughter in the face of war. The galaxy watched with shaking hearts as the Terran fleet surrounded the core invader ships not with fire, but with a quiet, crushing certainty that made even the strongest species feel small, because this was not the fury of a race returning to seek revenge. This was the calm, heavy presence of a species that had carried the weight of the universe longer than anyone else, and as the shimmering Terran aid fields spread outward to stabilize dying enemy vessels, the battlefield transformed from a place of war into something heavier, something sacred, as if the stars themselves leaned closer to witness the moment humanity reclaimed its place not as rulers but as protectors, and the council chamber, once chaotic, fell into absolute silence as the delegates pressed closer to the screens, unable to tear their eyes away from the human commander standing beneath the soft golden light of the flagship, his expression unreadable, carved with an emotion no one could quite name. The humbled invader leader, surrounded by the quiet hum of Terran energy fields, lifted his trembling head and whispered into the channel. Why would you help us? After everything we did?" And the human commander, who had carried the burden of 2,000 years of silence, spoke with a sadness so deep it felt like a wound stretching across generations. "Because we know what it feels like to lose everything," he said softly, his voice steady but heavy with memories the galaxy would never fully understand. "And because someone must break the cycle." Those words struck harder than any weapon, and the invader leader lowered his head, tears falling in a way that shocked even his own people, who had never seen their rulers cry. But the human continued, his tone growing softer still. "When our worlds burned in the old war, no one came for us. No one stood beside us. We rebuilt our future alone. We do not want any species to feel that same loneliness." His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with the weight of compassion strong enough to shake an empire. Across the council, representatives covered their mouths, unable to hold back their own tears as the truth settled over them like a dawn breaking through centuries of darkness. Humanity had suffered more than any species imagined, and instead of returning with hatred, they returned with purpose, with a promise that no one else would endure what they endured. Suddenly, from one of the damaged enemy vessels, a faint transmission crackled through, weak, distorted, but unmistakably desperate. "Human commander, our children, they are dying." The galaxy flinched at those words. For a heartbeat, the battlefield felt as fragile as glass. And then humanity moved. Without hesitation, without debate, without a single moment wasted. Terran medships broke formation, gliding across the void like streaks of gentle blue flame, slipping past the terrified enemy crews with silent precision, extending beams of healing energy, stabilizing life support, repairing hull fractures, and for the first time in 2,000 years, the galaxy witnessed humanity reveal the side of themselves that once earned their loyalty from allies long gone. The side that cared even for the children of their enemies. The council chamber erupted into quiet sobs as screens displayed Terran drones carrying injured alien young from burning decks, shielding them with shimmering blue barriers, whispering soft comfort in voices that sounded almost human, soothing, warm. Even the enemy soldiers, who hours earlier had raised weapons against the galaxy, found themselves staring at the humans in stunned disbelief, whispering in awe, "They are saving us, even now, why?" And the human commander answered without turning, his eyes fixed on the unfolding rescue. "Because mercy is not weakness." His voice deepened, filled with a strength so profound it felt like a truth carved into the stars. "It is the proof we are still human." The invader leader sobbed harder, covering his face, while the council speaker whispered through trembling lips, This is why they feared you, and why they needed you." But the moment of fragile peace shattered when the ground beneath the galaxy shook, every sensor, every ship, every planet vibrating under a pulse so dark, so deep, so ancient that even the Terran fleet stiffened with sudden alertness. The human commander looked up sharply, his jaw clenching, his eyes narrowing as a faint red distortion appeared on the far edge of the battlefield, a crack tearing through the void like a wound splitting open. The invader leader's face drained of all color. "No, no, it followed us," he whispered in pure terror. The council stared, confused and terrified. "What followed you?" The invader leader trembled violently. "Not our empire, not our armies, not our creations," his voice broke. "Our fear." The crack widened. A shape began to emerge, massive, monstrous, older than the galaxy's recorded history, radiating a coldness that made the Terran ships ignite defensive barriers instantly. The human eye's calm voice shifted for the first time, turning sharp, calculating, almost urgent. "Unidentified anomaly. Energy signature predates council formation. Classification, unknown." The human commander took a slow, heavy breath, the weight of recognition settling over him like a shadow returning from a nightmare he thought he'd buried centuries ago. "It's one of the old ones," he whispered. The council gasped. The invaders panicked. The galaxy went still. "The things we hid the galaxy from," the commander continued, his voice low. "The real enemy." A cold silence fell, deeper than before, as the red crack split wider, revealing something far worse than an empire seeking resources, something that crawled at the edge of existence itself. For the first time since awakening, the human commander's voice carried fear, not for humanity, but for everyone else. "Get behind us," he ordered. The invader fleets obeyed instantly, driven by instinct, by terror, by faith. The council froze, waiting. The Terran fleet shifted formation, shields rising, engines brightening, weapons charging with ancient precision, and the commander whispered the words that rippled through history like a warning bell. "The peace is over again, but this time, the galaxy will not face the darkness alone." Because this time, humanity had returned. The red crack widened until it felt like the universe itself was tearing open, bleeding light that did not belong to any star or any age the galaxy remembered. And as the monstrous shape inside the rift slowly pushed through, even the Terran ships, colossal, ancient, confident, seemed to tense, their glowing blue hulls dimming for a heartbeat as if acknowledging the arrival of something that humanity had once bled entire civilizations to stop, something they had hoped the galaxy would never see again, and every species watching across thousands of systems felt a coldness sink into their bones, a coldness humans knew too well, a coldness that tasted like extinction. The enemy ruler who moments ago begged for mercy now collapsed in utter terror, his voice breaking as he screamed, "It followed us across dead galaxies. It devours systems. It is not a species, it is hunger," and the human commander stared at the emerging horror with eyes full of recognition and pain, because he too knew this creature, or something like it, something humanity once fought far from the council's borders, far from the comfortable light of civilization, in forgotten corners where stars died screaming. The rift pulsed again, and now the shape fully emerged, a vast, impossible entity made of writhing crimson tendrils and shifting darkness, an ancient predator that fed not on planets or fleets but on the very life inside stars. And as it opened a maw of swirling void that bent gravity itself, the council chamber erupted into cries of horror, believing this was the end, believing the peace was not merely over but erased from the universe. But the Terran commander did not tremble. His face hardened, shadows gathering around his features, and though his voice was soft, it cut through the panic like a blade of steel wrapped in fire. "We fought these things when your ancestors were still learning how to speak." The council stared at him in disbelief. The invaders trembled. The children rescued by Terran medships clung to their saviors as the battlefield shook. The human commander lifted his hand, and instantly the Terran fleet reformed, shifting into a war formation not seen in 2,000 years. A formation so ancient it belonged to songs no species alive remembered. The Terran AI activated battle protocols that had slept for centuries. Protocol, Eclipse. A chill swept across the void. The galaxy held its breath. Blue fire erupted across the Terran fleet, their engines roaring like awakening beasts, their shields blooming outward in layers of shimmering light, creating a dome around the council worlds, the surrendered invader ships, the frightened civilians across star systems. Humanity did not stand in front of the galaxy. Humanity stood around it. The ancient horror screamed, a sound so deep it cracked asteroids into dust. But humanity did not retreat. They advanced. Without hesitation. Without fear. Without doubt. The commander whispered, "We end what we started." The first Terran ship fired, unleashing a beam of concentrated blue-white light that pierced the darkness like a spear of dawn. The impact ripping parts of the creature into molten fragments that evaporated instantly. But the monster reformed, roaring louder, releasing tendrils of red energy that lashed toward the Council worlds like lightning, and every species watching felt despair grip their hearts, until humanity answered. Terran shields flared, layer after layer absorbing the blow until the creature's attack broke like waves crashing against an unbreakable cliff, and the commander spoke again, voice filled with calm fire. "We are humanity. We do not fall to the night." The Terran fleet unleashed everything, ancient weapons forgotten by time, energy bursts that rippled through dimensions, gravitational hammers that bent reality, all synchronized with perfect precision, and for every strike the creature regenerated, but slowly, painfully, its resistance began to crumble under the relentless human assault, each attack echoing the fury of a species that refused to vanish even when their own worlds once burned. Meanwhile, the galaxy watched in awe as human medships, instead of fleeing, continued protecting injured civilians, even in the middle of a cosmic war, shielding them from stray energy bursts while Terran warships carved through the ancient monster like blades forged from the heart of stars. Then the human commander gave the order the universe had not heard in 2,000 years. Pulse the core. The flagship's engines flared to life, glowing brighter than any sun, and a deep vibration rolled across the galaxy as an ancient Terran superweapon awakened. One humanity had vowed never to use unless the darkness returned. The Council watched with trembling reverence. The invaders watched with hope and fear blending into one. The children of the battlefield watched with wide, innocent eyes. The human commander whispered one final command. "For the peace we lost, and the peace we will rebuild." The flagship released a pulse of pure blue energy that rippled outward like a tidal wave of light, striking the creature at its heart, tearing through every tendril, every shadow, every fragment of ancient hunger until it shrieked in a final, desperate cry that echoed across dying dimensions, and then it vanished. The rift closed. The darkness ended. Silence filled the void, not empty, but peaceful. For the first time in 2,000 years, the galaxy saw an enemy fall to humanity's strength not through rage, not through cruelty, but through purpose, through sacrifice, through unstoppable resolve. The Terran fleet powered down slowly, their blue fire fading into soft glows as medships continued tending to survivors, and the Council released tears of disbelief, awe, and gratitude. The invader leader whispered, "You saved us, even when you had every reason not to." The human commander looked at him with tired eyes that carried centuries of battles and wounds, and he shook his head. "No, we saved the galaxy. That is our burden. And our promise." Across thousands of worlds, beings of every species knelt, not in fear, but in respect, understanding that humanity wasn't a myth, wasn't a monster, wasn't a ghost. Humanity was the shield that stood between the universe and the dark. And now that the darkness had returned and been defeated, the commander lifted his gaze to the stars, his voice quiet but filled with unbreakable certainty. The peace begins again. And this time, it would be a peace protected by humans who had finally awakened.